And let's welcome our last speaker. It's Cintia Bali from the University of Pécs in Hungary.
So, hello everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm Cintia and I'm a PhD student at the University of Pécs. And in this presentation, I would like to introduce you our study about electronic storybooks. We were especially interested in that, how the multimedia and the interactive features used in electronic storybooks can enhance general knowledge acquisition in elementary school children. So first, what are these electronic storybooks? The storybooks are applications. They can be downloaded from App Store or Google Play, and they are using different multimedia elements and interactive features to featuring different stories or different subject materials. Multimedia elements are usually automatic. They are, for example, the narration, the sound effects, the background music, or some automatic animation or static illustrations. And they do not require any activities from the user. On the other hand, interactive features are depending highly on the activity of the user because they have to be activated through the touchscreen or by the movement of the device. So there are many studies about electronic storybooks and about that, how well they can be used for educational purposes, but the results are controversial, especially for interactive features. For multimedia elements, we are mostly sure about that they can be helpful. So they help the processing of having the processing of information, and they can guide attention to the relevant features or the relevant stimuli on the screen. So they can help the understanding and processing the information by the children using these electronic storybooks. But interactive features can be a source of distraction, and also they are usually require some shifting of attention or switching attention between the different stimuli on the screen. They on one hand they can be a source of distraction, but interactive features can be also really useful because they elicit some activity from the user, so the children can learn something by different activities by using these interactive features. And we were interested in that also, how the learning outcome can be affected by individual differences of the children. Usually, individual differences, especially in executive functions, are not included in these type of studies. However, it's kind of evident if someone has a better working memory capacity. It's easier for them to integrate the different the different information coming from different modalities, and also with better attentional mechanisms, it's easier for the children to focusing on the relevant information and ignoring all the irrelevant figures or sound effects while they're using the electronic storybooks. So in our study, we had two aims. First, we were interested in that if these multimedia and interactive features can help improve the children's recall performance after using these applications. And also we were interested in that if individual differences in working memory capacity and attention can have any effect on the recall performance of the children. So we conducted a study with elementary school students because we have already done a few studies with preschoolers, and we were interested in some other age groups too. Children was randomly assigned into three groups. We had a control group, a multimedia only group, and an interactive app group. And also I forgot to tell, but the participants were all third and fourth grade students. in our study. First we had to choose an interactive storybook, and we used one interactive storybook that is available through the Booker Kids application. It can be downloaded from Google Play and also from the App Store, so it's commercially available. So after we had this interactive storybook, we created the stimuli for the control group and also for the multimedia only group. In the control group, we printed out the illustrations of the application, so children could see the static illustrations from the application, and also we used the same text, which was read aloud by the experimenter. Also, only one student and the experimenter were present during the testing. After we had this visual stimuli for the control group, then we created a screen video of the application. So we showed to the children this video about the electronic storybook. So in this way, they can see all the animations and hear the sound effects, the background music, but they do not have any access to the interactive elements. And in the third group, in the interactive app group, children could freely manipulate with the smartphone and with the electronic application. So they can try out all the interactive features, and they can use movements and everything that was available through these electronic storybooks. Okay, so this was, yeah, and I also have some pictures and a video about the book that we used. I tried to find an English version of it, but I couldn't find it. So this was an electronic storybook about the wildlife of the ocean. And I will show you one interaction from this storybook. The children saw all of these options, and they can choose one of them. Of course, first they choose one, but they went through all of these options during the task and during the story. So, so they could choose one, and then they saw these three options, for example, like here, and they had some statement about the figures. Okay, we'll start again. Okay, so here this text is saying that I am the fastest fish in the sea, and the children had to choose that figure that is fitting the best to this statement. And if the answer was correct, then they could move on. They received the feedback, and they could move on to another option. But if the answer was incorrect, they heard some sad music, and they can choose another option from these three. So they can have the correct answer by themselves. So mostly these type of interactions were used in this interactive storybook that we used here. Okay, so the first part of the study was the storybook exposure to the children, and then after the storybook exposure, we asked 14 open-ended questions from the children. We asked these questions immediately after the storybook exposure, and we recorded these their answers, and we asked them two independent scorers to rate the answers of the children from 0 to 2, and then we tested the agreement between the independent scorers. As you can see that, we found a high agreement between the raters, so we can use this data to further data analysis. Okay, so after the assessment of recall performance, we had some measurement on cognitive functions. We used the forward and the backward digit test to measure working memory capacity. We used PRN test to measure sustained attention. And also we used the semantic fluency test to measure verbal skills of the children. Okay, so this was our experimental design. So first storybook exposure, then we asked the 14 open-ended questions, and then children participated in the cognitive tests. The order of these tests were counterbalanced across the children. And also, additionally, we asked the teachers to fill out the ADHD rating scale 4 regarding each child. This is a questionnaire to measure inattention and hyperactivity and impulsivity. And also, we asked the parents to fill out some demographic questions. For example, we asked them about the usage of the touchscreen devices of their children. Okay, so now we can move on to our results. We used the covariance analysis to test our hypothesis, and we found a main effect of the book format. We observed the highest recall performance in the interactive condition, and we observed the lowest recall performance in the control condition, while multimedia-only condition was somewhere between the control and the interactive conditions. But according to the Tukey-corrected pairwise comparison, we only found significant differences between the control and the interactive conditions. We also included the cognitive, the results of the cognitive tests as covariates in our analysis, and we found that verbal skills and inattention influenced the recall performance of the children. However, we couldn't find any interactions, so we can say that verbal skills and inattention could influence equally the recall performance in all the three conditions. And we did follow-up correlation tests, and if we see the results, then we can see that it's kind of evident, but so with better verbal skills, children perform better on the recall performance test, and also with worse attentional performance, children performed worse on the recall performance test, but this could be observed in all the three groups. So overall, we found that multimedia elements and interactive features can improve recall performance of elementary school children. With this, we could replicate our results with preschoolers, and also we found that this improvement is independent from individual differences in cognitive functions. So even verbal skills and inattention had an influence on the recall performance of the children. We observed the same amount of effect in all the three groups. Okay. This was kind of interesting because in our study with preschoolers, we found that attentional mechanisms affected the recall performance, especially in the multimedia and in the interactive condition. But we did that study with preschoolers, and also we used different electronic storybooks in the study. And I think with the study, it's really important to know that so mostly in this electronic storybook, there were 1 or 2 interactions and multimedia elements per pages. So children didn't have to integrate that much information from the different resources. So in the future, we would like to investigate that if the effect of individual differences can be more pronounced if we use more multimedia and more interactive features. If we take into consideration the cognitive law theory, which is highly connected to the cognitive theory of multimedia learning, we can assume that the amount of multimedia and interactive elements can be really important factor here. So in the future, we would like to test this, and also we would like to use more sensitive and accurate tests for measure cognitive functions. So personally, I would like to use the attentional network test to measure attentional performance, and also Peabody task would be a better measurement of verbal skills, for example, but here we were limited by that how long children can pay attention to these tasks. Okay, also what is important here, we didn't do any follow-up tests. We did it with preschoolers, and we found that the improvement in recall performance is maintained through time, but we didn't do any follow-up tests with the elementary school students. And also, what is really important, our results can be also explained by the novelty effect. So maybe using these devices was kind of new to the children, so they were more interested, more motivated to take part in our experiment. So it's a question if the children can get used to these devices. Maybe the differences between the control conditions and interactive conditions can be diminished, but we cannot know this for sure. Yeah, but we think that it's really important to do investigations at this field because there is an excessive digitalization in the field of education, and we already using these multimedia and interactive features, but we really have to know that how the children can benefit most from using these devices. Okay, so thank you for your attention. And I'm really happy to discuss this topic and answer for your questions if you have any questions. And you can contact me and ask about the research on that email address that you can see on the screen. Okay.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? So let me start with one while you're gathering your thoughts. So I was wondering whether you looked at the interaction with the style of the interaction with the book and the information seeking or exploration, and whether that had an effect on recall. So, like, if I got it correctly, the kids got the tablet with the book, and then they could explore it. Probably it varied individually how they explored. And whether these differences had effects on their learning.
Yeah, we didn't measure the exact time of how, so it's how much time they spent on exploring the devices, but mostly it was 3 to 5 minutes, so there were no big differences in this case, so how much time they spent on the, for example, on the control condition, where they could use the static illustrations, or in an interactive storybook. So it's, yeah, I think it's a really important factor, and in the future we should include this measurement. So it's at least to measure how much time they spend with the static illustrations, with the interactive storybook. Of course, the video for the multimedia can be longer, but yeah, I think it's a really good point, and I cannot answer exactly for this question. I don't think if it had any effect, but we can't rule out this. So in the future, it would be great to involve this type of measurements. Okay, thank you.
Do we have more questions? Yes, I didn't see you.
Hi, congratulations for the presentation. Do you think it will be like the results would vary according to the content of the multimedia elements?
So if you are interested in the contents of the storybooks, I don't think so, because we also, so far we did 3 studies, 2 with preschoolers and 1 with elementary school students, and we used 3 totally different storybooks, and the results are the same. So yeah, but if we are interested in the type of the multimedia features or interactive elements, yeah, it's depend, I think, on that. It's okay. There are some. So if you check these electronic storybooks, then you can see that okay, there are some interactive features that are not really relevant to the story, or it's also really important if they can be repeated or they just can be activated once. So I think for these features of interactive elements and multimedia elements, it's really important. And it can have an effect on the results or how the children processing the information by these electronic storybooks. But the content of the storybook, I think it don't really matter. Okay, thank you.
Is there one last question somewhere? If
Okay,
I'm blind.
It was a really good talk. I was interested, so thinking about your other studies as well, and you talk about the difference in the interactivity. Do you think it affects the sort of pacing of the interaction for the children? So self-paced activities generally are more beneficial, right, in media engagement. And I wondered whether the interactions differ across your different books. So with this one, it was really nice, right? So they'd press a button, it would give an animation, and then it had its own timing, but then it was up to the child, presumably, when they next pressed another option. So I was interested in whether that's the same across different types of books.
So there are, for the interactive features, there are really many types of these features. I don't know if the pace of these interactive features can affect, because we didn't test it earlier. But so, for example, in the previous studies that we did, there were a little other type of interactions. They were more about more about related to the story. So, for example, one of them, the children touched the touch screen, and they could do a pancake, for example. So some of them was similar to this, but some of them was totally different activities. But the results are the same. However, I am not sure if so usually children perform better with these interactive elements, but maybe the effect of individual differences in cognitive functions can be different. So I think it's easier for them to pay attention for these type of stimuli, and it's easier to integrate all the different modalities and the activity. But when there are some other type of interactions, it seems more complicated, and also it is supported by our previous studies, because there we found a negative correlation. So it's children with the children with better attentional mechanisms could perform better on the interactive and multimedia, but it was more difficult for the children with less developed attentional mechanisms in that type of interactions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Cintia, and let's thank all our speakers again. And I think it's time for the mulled wine reception.